show you got heart. Now we're playing the game and we're totally scoring, learning how to make a virtual a business boring, showing up every morning, ready for the show. I'ma get ready. Cold engaging virtual meetings 2.0.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. If you're watching here on social media, make sure and hit the subscribe, share, like, and comment. If you say something live here on the show, we might give you a shout out. Our episodes just released episode number 100. And if you want all of the podcasts, please go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online. You want more of this? You want to get to and check it out in the real world? Go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/con and come to our conference, the Engaging Conference, the last week of October. Now, let's just get on with it because I have one of the most special guests I have ever had on this show. Let me just tell you, she's one of 400 National Speakers Association certified speaker professionals. She's one of 125 Hall of Famers and one of only 30 Cavett Award winners, which makes her, for those who don't know any of these awards, the perfect example of a seasoned keynoter who is still in demand after being the first female president of National Speakers Association. She has clocked over 3,500 live presentations, and she was delivering virtual long before Zoom has even been invented. She's going to hypnotize you in the next 30 minutes, right? Because I can tell you, I saw her at the Thrive Conference, Winter Conference, and she was magnificent. Please, let's welcome Patricia Fripp. The Queen of Speaking has entered the building. Hello, Patricia. How are you?
Well, what a wonderful build-up. That was the best walk-in music ever. I took Heroes at Thrive, which my brother played on, but I think next time anyone says what walk-on music you want, I'll say, God Save the Queen. I wish I had thought about that, but you're the genius of virtual meetings.
Oh my gosh, Patricia, thank you so much. It'd be the honor to select your walk-on music. It is so apropos, though. And Patricia, you know, it's amazing, but a few of my friends don't know who you are. So could you just take just a minute now and to explain who you are and what you do in the world?
Well, certainly. And isn't it irritating that your friends have had wonderful, successful lives and they've never heard of me? Because let's face it, most of us are what I would call famous people very few people have ever heard of. I arrived in America at 20 as a hairstylist with no job, nowhere to live, didn't know anyone, had $500 to my name, and went out and got a job at the Mark Hopkins Hotel in the beauty salon. I was one of the first women in a new industry, which was men's hairstyling, and was traveling nationwide for a hair product company doing seminars. All my executive clients who came in my salon said, would you speak to my Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, Lions Club, Breakfast Club? I realized this was the least expensive and most fun way to promote my salon. Now, we're going back decades, long before we thought of the internet. And the best way to promote was to have the best yellow page ad, which I did, of course. And because I had taken the Dale Carnegie speaking course and sales course, all my pals in Dale Carnegie, we were the most ambitious group. We called ourselves the Future Millionaires Breakfast Club. We went to every seminar, every rally, every program we heard of. Didn't matter what the subject was. And at one rally, we flew from San Francisco to LA. Don Hudson was the MC. This was a positive mental attitude rally. And he talked about, a lot of you are asking about speaking. We've got the National Speakers Association. Leave your card, we'll follow up. Now, I joined the National Speakers Association and turned up at my first convention in, dare I say, 1977.
Woo.
Yes. And I thought, no one's going to want to talk to me. I only talk to Rotary clubs and hairdressers. And two situations appeared. One, I realized there was a possibility this could be my next profession, perhaps. Now, I loved being a hairstylist, and I was traveling around demonstrating at the New York hair shows, and my haircuts were in magazines. So I was on a roll. I was not ready to retire, and I was 2 years into a 10 years lease. And I thought, well, perhaps to be in a position, if I want to be a speaker. Secondly, and this is where luck steps in.
Mm.
I walked into lunch, and there was a table of 3 men and in an open seat. Now, remember, I'm very young and cute in those days. And I said, may I join you? And one of the gentlemen, his name was Paul Sturgeon. Another was Ty Boyd, who was very famous. And when I found out after, when people said, you know, Ty Boyd is really famous, John, I would not have had the confidence of saying, can I join you if
Right.
I'd known he was famous. But Paul Sturgeon said, I'm in charge of a program called Speak to Me,
Mm.
where new speakers can get up and do 10 minutes. Would you like to be on the program? I said yes. And after that program, Mike Frank, Cabot winner, past president, CPAE, had a speakers bureau, which he still does, and also was a speaker, and he promoted big rallies.
Mm.
He booked me to speak to 2,000 people on the same program with Dr. Robert Schuller, the minister from Garden Grove, the Crystal Cathedral, which most of your listeners are too young to even remember.
Oh, but
However, he was a big star.
I listened to him growing up. My mom listened to him all the time. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Now, you can say only in America and NSA can you get discovered at your first convention. So that was the background. And 7 years after I joined, I became the first woman president. And that's when I gave my salon to my staff 1 year ahead of schedule and went full time. However, even when I had my salon,
Yes.
I was still traveling a lot, speaking. I'd speak for IBM one day and be back cutting hair at 7 the next morning. More than your listeners wanted to know, but that's my background.
Well, I want to back up to the background for a moment here,
All
Patricia.
right.
What was that moment, or what can you share? There's a lot of women leaders I work with. Like our good friend Ana Leata shared that she's been on 50 boards, and 32 of them, she was the first woman on that board. And so I just want to hear a little bit from you,
Yeah.
Patricia. What was the progression to getting to that president position?
Well, it was not my goal. It was not my goal. It was not my aspiration.
Yeah,
All I can say is Bill Johnson, who was the executive director,
yeah.
said this will be our 10th year and we should have a woman president. Obviously,
Mm.
in those days, there were less women speakers than there are now.
Wow. Yeah.
And Jeannie Robertson was better known than I was. However, she was the second woman president, and she was without a doubt the best humorist ever. I mean, worked harder. Jeannie was amazing. Except I was more of a business speaker.
Right.
And I don't know if it'd make any difference now or even did then, but they thought more of a business speaker should be the first woman president rather than the humorist.
Mm.
So it was really not my aspiration. Now, when it comes to leadership, this is the best advice I give to people in leadership positions.
Okay.
I was stepping up as president with a board who were seasoned speakers. I mean, really mature in the industry. George Morrissey, written 15 books, and Summers White. I mean, just an incredible amount of people. And I was frankly terrified. I thought, here I am, a hairstylist, and I'm going to be president and run meetings with all these prestigious people.
Yes.
And anyone going in the position, there are some parts that you know you can breeze through. Being on stage, making an announcement, fine, I could do that. Take one area that terrifies you the most. And that was running board meetings and focus on that. There was a gentleman called Ed Bliss, and he had an 8-cassette pack on how to run meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So for 8 months, all I did was listen to these cassettes and study parliamentary procedure. And after my first board meeting, Nido Quabain, who you know in the National Speakers Association, we consider God,
You still got
said to me, Patricia, I have never seen anyone who knows more about parliamentary procedure than you do. That one compliment from that one person was worth 8 months of study.
Wow.
And what that taught me is we had a certain problem from one individual on the board. And because of parliamentary procedure and knowing it,
Yes.
I solved the problem. Because without going in a lot of details, but we'd all decide what we're going to do. Then he'd come up with a different point of view, call the question. Well, what I found out is 2/3 or something like that have to agree to call the question.
Right.
And I knew we weren't all ready. We needed more discussion. So I solved the problem by understanding parliamentary procedure. So to any leader or anybody going to any volunteer role, take what scares you and study it, and everything else will be a piece of cake.
There is a new movie that is out on Netflix. I just watched last night or yesterday, and it's around a woman and her mom passes away. And the mom leaves her this mission that says, you wrote this bucket list of things when you were younger, and you need to complete them if you want the inheritance. And it really was. One of them was do something one day, every day this week that just that terrifies you. Public speaking. Now, let's talk about this for a second. Patricia Fripp, you know that public speaking is often more scarier than dying for most of the world, of the people. How, how did you get through that terror? Do you still feel any of that terror sometimes? I know I do occasionally.
Well, it's not terror. What I would say, and now, of course, I am mostly a speech coach. I still speak, obviously, but I make my living, I would say, helping executive sales teams, other speakers, engineers.
Yeah.
Who knew most of my life would be with engineers? I help them with their presentations. And one question I'm frequently asked is, can anyone be a good speaker? And I say, well, everyone can be much better and certainly good.
Yes,
Now,
agree.
there are some people who it is more natural for them in their personality to stand up and speak.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a little girl, my father owned the Temple Hall, which was an event venue. And my mother being a Rotary wife, they would have parties for the elderly, senior citizens, which I always thought was hysterical because you had people having tea who were maybe 58 or 60, and Mrs. Butcher, who was 82 years old, was serving them. It was for the old age pensioners. And many of the Rotary wives were older than the people they were serving. Anyway, I used to get up and make up stories to entertain the elderly. And now what were they about? How did I do it? I have no idea. So, one, it is more natural for some people to get up. I always entertained my clients in the salon. So I was always entertaining, and I would sneak out and talk to everyone, tell them a joke or something funny or a story, and entertain everybody. So for me, it was more natural. However, whatever your talent is, my next door neighbor is a brilliant artist. And I said, Tana, were you always a good artist? And she said, yes. However, I had to go to school to learn the structures and the principles. So for many people, John, as you know, it's easier to get up.
Mhm.
However, you still have to understand there are principles in every discipline that you need to master.
Mhm.
And that's how I can absolutely guarantee you take my advice and you can be an engineer rock star. You have to take my advice, of course. And a lot of my clients who are not professional speakers, they say, I'm a terrible speaker. And I will say, no, you're not. You're an untrained speaker.
Mm.
You spent your entire life being good at what you are now doing that you make your living.
Mhm.
And I promise everybody, and this will be true of your listeners, it's going to take a fraction of the time you've already invested learning your skill that you make your living to become a good speaker. All you have to do is decide to focus your attention. And of course, if you're a mature person, it's better get some sort of coach who can help you save time.
Well, now, speaking of coach, I watched you hot seat 7 people, all right, in Orlando's Thrive Winter Conference. And I just want to hear a little bit of behind the scenes. Like, I want to see if I can hear the hypnotized voice in your head. Some people didn't get out more than 3 words, Patricia, before you said stop. And I agreed in the audience, right? But I want to know what's a little bit of that process for you, of what are you thinking about, or maybe what comes to you to give feedback in somebody in a hot seat. For those who don't know what a hot seat is, somebody came up and said they were going to present something. Patricia let them say something, and then at some point she might have said stop and then tried to coach them, right? So, Patricia, what's a little insiders on that process?
What that is what I call razor focused mini coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And because most of the program was about opening your presentation, how to captivate your audience in 30 seconds,
Right.
I said, get up and deliver your opening. And my only criteria is don't make it up on the spot because I might ask you to repeat it and you have to be able to repeat word for word what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to a formal presentation, we prepare. I mean, and I rehearsed a lot. When it comes to razor focused mini coaching, because I don't want to know, we ask for volunteers. I have
Yeah.
no idea who it is.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they're going to say or
Right.
their level of expertise.
Right.
And my rule is this is mini coaching. You are going to speak until I say stop or touch your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give you a suggestion or a recommendation on how you could do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And my superpower, which, makes people gasp, is to be able to listen and instantaneously tell you how you could do better. Or if I say that's magnificent, don't change, I could say, if you ever wanted to just change it to make it help you fall in love with your own content, you could try it this way as well. And this is living on the knife edge of now because you have no idea what's going to happen. You cannot make anybody feel bad for being brave enough to stand up in front of
Right.
hundreds of their peers.
Right.
And it is my personal commitment to the audience. It has to be valuable for them
Yes.
because the 7 people on stage really represent the audience.
Two, three
No, they
hundred
weren't
people.
as seasoned as some people in the audience, but I was pleasantly surprised how many really seasoned professionals
Yes.
really were impressed with how we did that.
Well, thank you for a little bit of that insight. Now let's turn to virtual, which is number one. Just take a moment, and this is what we talk about all the time here: is Patricia's executive presence, right? Patricia has this beautiful border around here. She makes sure you know her name, right? That you can get to her website. And Patricia let me in a little secret, right? She made sure she was show ready, right? When she's going to show up on virtual, there's no Lululemon pants here. There's no idea. No, you're going to get Patricia Fripp in all her glorious and her greatness here. So let's talk a little bit. Let's go way back. What was your first virtual program and what was that like?
Well, years ago, one of my associates, somebody who, I mean, I can't even remember what services he did for me, but he was an engineer, and he said, "I built you a virtual office." And it had some of the elements of Zoom, except if you were talking to a prospect,
Mhm.
different video clips were embedded. So you say, have you seen my demo? You're interested in me talking about sales. Would you like to see a short clip? And it gave a lot of flexibility. And, I spent many years an executive, for example, one of my executives from Johnson and Johnson said, when can you come to Morristown, New Jersey? I mean, we organized and we booked a whole day. Well, after 2 hours, he said, my boss just called, I gotta go. Well, understand they paid me for a full day,
Right.
but I had to fly in, adjust to the time change, work with him and fly home. So the next time he asked me, when can you come to Morristown? I said, I can't. You're meeting me in my Zoom office.
Okay.
And if you think, to me, Zoom and these platforms, now I'm most comfortable with Zoom. I love Zoom,
Love it
and
too.
that is my preference. I when in the earlier days, I'd go to meetings and some of these other, which I don't think are as good.
Mhm.
But that's me. I'm not knocking any other company who brings us virtual meetings. I personally cannot understand Teams. It's beyond my
That's
pay grade. And
You love that,
funnily enough,
Patricia.
when I've done it,
That's
yeah.
my former employer, Patricia. I used to work at Microsoft for a decade, and I still
Okay,
don't get it
good.
either.
Well,
It's okay.
could you give a lesson on how mere mortals can use Teams? Yeah.
Oh my.
And believe me, I love Microsoft. I have
Yeah.
stock in their company and I use all their other products, but yeah, anyway. So this is going back. So, I mean, probably at least 5 years before the pandemic, a
Right.
good portion of my business was in my own virtual office.
Hmm.
And I would do WebEx and whatever my clients were asking.
Hmm.
And then we got into Zoom, and that was marvelous. Now, I'm a follower of Ford Sakes, and
Hmm.
Ford Sakes was the person who taught me about vMix. Now, when I say taught me, I don't know how to put these frames. My assistant does all this. And what I can also do, for example, is when I work for different clients and I'm giving them coaching or recording a video for them, Harold has built me different frameworks for my corporate clients, which, as you know, the more you customize for a client, the more impressed they are.
Yes.
Especially with your good clients that give you, a lot of business for years. It's worth Harold's effort. And so most of my coaching is in Zoom. Now,
Hmm.
another aspect, I belong to a club. The first group I ever spoke to was the Golden Gate Breakfast Club.
Yes. Right.
And I said we should have, it was so much fun. It was all men, so much fun. Movers and shakers in San Francisco. And I said we should have one for women. In 1986, I helped found one. And we knew, because women who were associated with the men on the board started it.
Hmm.
And we all knew, well, they don't let us into their club. Well, I didn't care because we had so much fun with ours. Well, in 2000,
Uh-huh.
I was invited to be the first woman member. And for the last year or so, I have been president.
Wow.
Well, in the pandemic, and what we noticed in the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, is like every other organization. Companies don't pay for their leaders to belong anymore. It was mostly entrepreneurs, and our attendance was shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was the pandemic, and we went to Zoom. And somebody said, was the pandemic downfall for the club? I said, no, it saved us. It saved us.
Right.
Because I could bring in all my speaker friends from around the country. So we have members all around. So Zoom, it saved that organization. All right.
Wow.
All right. Now, okay, I'm going to shut up. What do you want me to talk? I forgot the question. But I love Zoom, as you can tell.
This is our plight as professional speakers, but it doesn't matter too. You're still hypnotizing me all the way home every day. So here's my next question too.
Yeah.
So for you, Patricia Fripp, when you're attending somebody else's virtual program, and I've seen you attend a lot, right?
Yeah.
What has to happen for you to be engaged in that virtual meeting? And I would love, actually, you said you had a technique we talked about in the pre-show. You can also
Well, I have two techniques.
Yeah.
One, you're going to drink. Use a straw. I have seen some of the superstar speakers pick up one of these big containers of their drink, glug, glug, glug. One, as you know, I'm far too elegant to want you looking up my nose. That is one of my biggest contributions. Secondly, when I am delivering a presentation where I'm using slides, after each segment of content, and I tell the audience up front, every time you see the question marks, you can ask a question, make a comment, or an observation. Mm-hmm. So I let people know, because it has to be somewhat interactive. Now, I'm a great believer, if you are having a virtual presentation, I am focused. I cannot look at the chat. Mm-hmm. I always get my assistant to be the moderator. Mm-hmm. And we say, you can put your question in the chat. And at segments throughout the presentation, right, I will say, especially when we have the question mark, are there any questions or comments that I need to know about? And this way, after each chunk of content, I might be talking about openings. Mm-hmm. If people say, well, how do I tell better stories? Paul's not going to read that question, because that's coming 2 segments down. Because I always say, do you have any short, specific questions about what you just heard about connecting to the audience, or about opening with impact, or structuring your presentation? So any questions that are off topic, Paul will introduce, and I say short, specific questions. So if it's a paragraph long, how can you get to the essence of what they're asking? Yeah. Yeah, it's too long, and sometimes they're not even a question. They're still rambling. They're still thinking about it. Yeah, Patricia, we call this, and feel free to borrow this term. My friend Gil gave it to me, which is this: never Zoom alone. Right? When you're in a big meeting, when you're keynoting, right? Patricia's job is to do this: stay connected to you, the attendee, right, in this conversation and the delivery. But let somebody else, right? If you have somebody else, that's a lot of what we do, Patricia, is that I produce for other speakers so that they can stay focused on their people. And we do all these other things, right? Because it's when you have 500, 600 people in a virtual meeting, it's almost impossible to moderate that chat in real time. And not everything is appropriate. And, you know, you have to make friends with your webcam. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So you don't want to be looking down, finding out what's valuable. Some people might be able to do it, but I can't, and I'm with you. Focus on your content. Focus on engaging. Focusing on what comes next. And with any presentation, we have to focus on our audience. And if you're worried about the technology,
Yeah.
And even when I have corporate clients that say, oh, we'll moderate for you, I always say, well, I know you have other chores and I'm going to bring in my own assistant,
Yes.
because you have a certain routine when you trust someone.
Yeah, don't mess that up. All right. That's your flow. You have a trust, right? And so trust, I tell people too, there's a trust you develop with your technology, that your mic is going to work, that your camera is always going to work. If you have something you can't trust in, what I love to say is technology is your new teammate, is what happened in the pandemic. And if you can't trust your technology, that piece of technology doesn't deserve to be in your setup.
And also I would say, I have clients that teach,
Yes.
and they say, not only don't the students interact, they don't turn on their webcam.
Oh, I know. I get it all the time. That's like the number one problem, right?
I know. Now, when you're a professional, you can keep the energy up if you're not getting anything back. But it is so much easier with the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. I have a slide, good behavior. You're going to smile into your webcam, make our speaker feel welcome.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless you're eating, exercising, putting on your makeup. We have a list of what you can turn it off if you're going to do this. But for the most part, keep it on and be engaged.
Well, see, now, listen, Patricia Fripp, I have a client, and I'd love to hear your advice around, let's pretend like you're consulting. They were an aerospace company. In April of 2020, they complained about video fatigue or Zoom fatigue, right? We're tired after meetings, blah, blah, blah. And they read one research report that said that having cameras on was contributing to virtual or video fatigue. So they turned cameras off for 5 years. What would you tell this company?
It is impossible to give the quality of presentation you expect unless your speaker, leader, presenter cannot see at least a handful of smiling, appreciative faces.
Yeah,
There is a reason we
yes.
have cameras. Because it's almost as if, and this was at the beginning when I was speech coaching, my approach is I sell by doing, I don't sell by telling.
Right.
So when I never take a client unless I have a conversation with them, and I call it a pretend you already hired me meeting. So I say,
I like
John,
that.
if we were, and this is the words, if we were locked in a room together, what presentation would be working on? Well, I don't know. Well, when is your next important presentation? Well, the January sales meeting. I said, well, that's 3 months off. You doing anything this week? Well, actually, I do have to do this. All right, let's work on that. And then I say to them, is this the type of advice you're looking for?
Oh.
Yes. Now, certainly I can fly to Cincinnati. However, I know you're such a busy person. Does this format work for you? Because it's almost as if we're in the same room together. And they say yes. So even people say, I want coaching in person. You can have coaching in person. But if I'm flying to Cincinnati, it is going to cost you considerably more money because there's got to be a minimum. And
Right.
and
Yeah.
even if we're going to lock ourselves in a room,
Yeah.
I have someone who heard me at Thrive, a business exec. We're going to lock ourselves in a room in the Wynn Hotel in a suite, working on his speech. But a lot of this we do in advance, so you have to set up. So when we meet in person, we are off and running.
Yes. So let's turn our gaze to the future. You have seen so many changes, amazing stuff, things happening.
Now, John, what amazing have I seen? Amazing what?
Oh, well,
Not the naughty word.
oh, that's correct. You have seen a lot of changes in our industry. You have seen some beautiful innovations. You have seen how technology and our technique has greatly affected people on stage. As we turn to the future, Patricia, I just want to know, What do you see in the future for either virtual or hybrid speaking? I would love to hear something like a wish you might have, or what do you see into the future based upon your experience?
Virtual meetings are not going away because they're so cost effective, and salespeople, it's so much better. It's so much easier to have a Zoom meeting. It's easier to get an appointment with people
Yeah.
that you might not get in to see them otherwise, because they feel they could leave quickly, or they'll say as well, I'll give you 15 minutes.
Yes.
You don't want to fly to Cincinnati, and I'm not picking on Cincinnati. I like Cincinnati.
WKRP. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're not going to fly to Des Moines for a 15-minute presentation if you can have it here.
Uh-huh.
When we're talking about virtual meetings, they are not going away. I don't think people have Zoom fatigue. They have Zoom fatigue for bad meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you and a lot of people make their living making meetings exciting. And I personally, I like virtual, I like in person. Yes, you can Zoom in, you can have a hybrid. I'm finding more groups are saying we're not doing hybrid. You come or you, for example, my biggest client, they have their Congress, the
Yes.
live presentation, and then they have virtual Congress.
Oh, interesting. They split them.
Well, they have two different events.
Yeah, they split them. Yeah.
Now, if you sign up for the Congress, you get a free ticket to the virtual,
Nice.
and it might be some of the same speakers, but it's a different presentation because I'm delivering two at the conference. Well, I have a different subject for virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And you pre-record it. You do
Yep.
pre-record it.
Interesting.
However, you come in live to answer their questions for 10
Oh, I've
minutes.
seen that. Yeah. Yeah.
And that worked quite effectively. I have signed up for virtual, winter workshops when I haven't been able to get there. That's fine. You get the content. As far as the future, none of us, even the experts, know what's going to happen with AI.
Oh my. Yeah. And you are, right? Are you using AI on a very regular basis, Patricia?
Yes, I tell you, to research, I love Perplexity, which is
Yeah.
relatively new.
Yes.
How I use ChatGTP, and you got to give it instructions, and it gives me back some elements I don't like. But what I find, because I have blog posts going back to 2009. Well, obviously my blog posts in 2009, not as good as they are now. So I will go to older blog posts. So I'll give you a perfect example.
Okay.
I started writing blog posts about acceptance speeches. I have won 2 Cicero Speech Writing Awards from the Professional Speechwriters Association for acceptance awards and commencement speeches. Anyway, I digress. I'll take an older article about, I say, when it comes to acceptance speeches, Academy Award speeches are not usually the model for how to give a great acceptance speech. However, there are rare exceptions. And I've taken segments of great acceptance of speeches. For example, Russell Crowe for he when it was a wonderful mind, a beautiful mind.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he said, I dedicate this award for anyone who has ever been on the downside of despair.
Oh. What? Right.
There's some lines like that. Cher for Moonstruck
Yeah.
said, I know this doesn't mean I am somebody. However, I am on my way to become somebody. I've said about the cabot, once they give you the cabot, now you really got to prove you earned it. Well, these are older examples. So for this year, I took it and I put in a chat GTP and I say, give me 10 more recent examples of which I might take my 4 favorite.
Okay.
I'll also take longer articles and say, well, I'm using my own content. Use this script and give me 15 40-second YouTube short scripts, 5 suggestions of titles for each one, and hashtags.
And what's your response when you get the reply?
Well, usually, yeah, you have to go in and tweak them. But it is a great way to stimulate your thinking. I would say, for example, when we were first making shorts, I took a class and Michael Davis and I were in a breakout room together.
Okay.
You think, well, what can I make a short on? And Michael said, well, tell me what's in your office. And I said, I got some beautiful, colorful elephants over on my shelf. And he said, why didn't you write shorts about elephants? So what I did, I went to chat GTP and give me 10 YouTube shorts about the attributes for elephants that are important for speakers.
Oh.
Again, it triggers your thinking.
Yeah.
Now, when I write proposals, now I write the proposal.
You still
and
do
I
to this
go
day.
in and say, don't change any of the details. See if you can make it more persuasive.
Oh, great prompt.
Yeah. Or for example, my column for the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. Blah, 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 blah. All right, make this more interesting to read. Okay. So it shortens your editing and perfecting, because we know every writer says you write and then you edit and review.
Yeah.
So it helps with that. But the secret, and we all know this, it is how the instructions you give it. Because sometimes I get it back, oh no, I prefer what I wrote first. Hardly any.
Well, Patricia, I'm going to give you a prompt that you should try. Somebody gave this to me and I thought it was very funny, but occasionally very, very useful, which is summarize this for somebody who has the attention span of a goldfish. That's a real prompt. You can actually use this prompt. And the funny part is that the attention span of a goldfish, Patricia, is 8 seconds. Do you know what the attention span of an average human being is? 7 seconds.
Now, I will debate you, because I read an article about it is impossible to test goldfish, so that it's not accurate, because you cannot put the electrodes on a goldfish. So scientists said this might sound entertaining, but it's rubbish. It's one of these made up.
All right. Well, I have just a few closing questions that will not be rubbish. Our good friend Jackie Wu, and this is for all. There's so many other speakers out there who want to know this question. What is your personal advice for new and emerging speakers to land paid speaking opportunities quickly?
Perfect your presentation. And reach out to everybody who knows and loves you. By that I mean, if they got a letter, they would open it. If they got an email, they recognize your email address or your name, and they would read it. And you say something like this. Dear Fred, it's a while since we talked, and I never get tired of telling the story about some incident you had together. And just as an update, as you know, I'm an expert in this, this, and this, and I have been doing this for so many years. I am now, based on demand, accepting more speaking engagements. So if you know anyone who's interested and expert on, please introduce us. This is a Frippicism, of which is trademarked, and you can go to my website, fripp.com, Frippicisms, and get hundreds of them free. It is not your client or prospect, or I would say past associates' business to remember you. It's our obligation and responsibility to make sure they don't forget us. So first of all, you have to let everybody who knows you what you're doing. Don't assume they're too busy with their own lives to know what you're doing.
Agree.
Then once you're more established, go back to your earlier clients. Or some of my first paid talks came from people who heard me at service clubs.
Yeah.
My hairstyling clients. I guarantee if you went back a few decades, there are at least 24 of my hairstyling clients that would have said, I launched her career. And you give them credit. There are a lot of them, but they all think they launched my career. And they really did. Not just one, but combined. So that's it. You have to be as good a speaker and marketer. And your marketing has to be ongoing, consistent, relentless. You start, you don't stop, but you revisit, you refocus, you rescript.
Okay, let's see if we can do this, Patricia. This is a special part of my interview known as the speed round. I'm going to ask a few questions.
One sentence answers.
Yes, one sentence answers. Are you ready? And then I'll play a funny noise like this at the end. Okay. Best haircut you've ever given?
Impossible to say. But I did cut Cabot Roberts' hair.
Oh my God.
Haircut he ever had.
Genius. Last time you felt lucky?
Walking off stage at Thrive.
Oh, good one. Who is your favorite ally?
My brother.
Well, your brother's amazing. What's one thing you would tell all women leaders?
Nobody can tell how you feel. They only see how you act.
Ooh, I'm going to hold on to that one. What's something you haven't done that terrifies you?
Jumped out of an airplane, and I'm never going to.
I have done that. It's probably not all it's cracked up to be. Favorite cassette tape program you own?
Oh, all the early National Speakers Association conventions.
Oh my, yeah. What are you hopeful about?
That I can still be working in 10 years.
And you are crushing it on stage every day, Patricia. And here's if you can magically get people to remember one thing from this particular interview, what would it be?
Don't say the word thing. It's never a thing. Be specific. Specificity builds credibility. Slap your hand, just like I make my executives.
Oh my God, you gave me the lesson too. Thank you so much, Patricia. Patricia, I just want to say thank you. I'm so honored to have you here today, and I look forward to seeing you next week at NSA Northwest 40th anniversary, where you're going to be a special speaker and guest, and of course in Arizona at NSA Influence. Patricia, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, and thank you for the contribution of the quality of virtual meetings.
Here we go. Thank you. That's Patricia Fripp, everybody. Oh, well, she's just giving you, Patricia, you've been hypnotized, right? Let me say, and she just wants you to remember these three things. Number one, turn on your camera.
They're not things.
Oh, they're not things. That's right. Here are three specificity items that Patricia gave us. Turn on your camera. Number two, have a meeting and at the end ask, is this the advice you're looking for? And number three, have meetings where you tell your client, pretend like you already hired me. Oh my goodness. I have been hypnotized, and you here too can be even more hypnotized if you subscribe, share, like, and comment. You want all the episodes, including like this. A new one is released every Wednesday at engagingvirtualmeetings.online, available on all 13 of the amazing podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify. Hey, if you want even more engaging content like this, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/CON and get your free ticket for the Engaging Conference. But most of all, if you want to be like Patricia Fripp, Go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, select interview, and you too could be the next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. God save the Queen, Patricia Fripp. We'll see you next time.
Don't we start people and keep